Do you have reluctant writers in your elementary classroom, and getting them to even put a few words on the page is painful for both you and them? Well, you're in luck today because I'm going to talk to you about how to help reluctant writers by giving them a little bit of inspiration and showing them that creative writing can be a lot of fun. Hi, I'm Molly, and I'm a fifth grade teacher, but I've also taught kindergarten and first grade, and I help teachers just like you learn how to use the Daily 5 in your elementary classroom so you can streamline your literacy block, get to all your guided reading groups, and help your students learn to love writing again. And part of that process comes down to the Daily 5, and I'll talk about that later in this video and how that's a creative writing time that you will soon grow to love with all of the tips and tricks I'm going to give you. We've all experienced the whole dreaded feeling of opening up your journal and having no idea what to write. And if you've taught for even just a year, a few years, 11 years like me, we've all had students that are reluctant writers. And not every child is going to absolutely love writing. We can't expect that. But what we can do is encourage them in different ways that maybe we haven't thought of before. And that's why I want to talk to you about Daily 5 today and the work on writing process and how to get a reluctant writer to come out of their shell and write some amazing things for you. So one of those things that has to be expressed when we talk about work on writing and Daily 5 is that is a creative writing time. This is completely separate from your writing instructional time, your whole group writing lesson. I want to differentiate that because Daily 5 is a system and process to help run your literacy block, and it doesn't teach you how to teach writing. It just gives you the tools to set up so that you can give your students writing stamina and show them how to do that and really fall in love with creative writing. Challenging for many teachers is just figuring out how to inspire students who don't want to write. And I think there's nothing worse than just telling them they have to write about X, Y, or Z. We already do that inside of their regular writing lesson where we are teaching them skills they need to know at each grade level. So I completely understand that as a fifth grade teacher, the writing process, there are things that I have to teach them. That's why when we switch over to work on writing during Daily 5 and it's not the main instructional time for writing, we can have so much more fun with that. But I do want to say at first, it really stressed me out because I didn't really know what I was doing as an elementary teacher in the beginning because I thought work on writing, oh, you just give them a notebook, they write, that's the end of the story. But when I would go back and check their work, I noticed some of them were not getting anything written down. They might just have some doodles and they were pretending to write because they didn't want to write. And that was because I wasn't giving them anything. I wasn't scaffolding or giving them a structure. So what I learned was creating writing prompts for every day gave my students creative license to have an idea cultivated for them that they could run with, or they could even take that idea and make it their own. And I had many students in the last few years that were very creative, but they couldn't necessarily come up with the idea during that small chunk of time, the 15 or 20 minutes that work on writing was happening during Daily 5. But if they could see a few prompts or at least one prompt, they could think of something. And I'm sure you've had a great idea after somebody else talked about something that they've done. And that's how writing worked for many of my students. And I was often blown away by the amazing prompts that they would come up with just based on what I was putting up on the board. So what I did was I sat down and I figured out, how many prompts do I want per grade level? For kindergarten, I thought one was pretty adequate. That's what they could handle. And those writing prompts are heavily scaffolded. They come with a writing page where the student can have a sentence starter and they trace over it. And then for your kindergartners that don't need the sentence starter, they can write on their own following the prompt, and a space to draw a picture and label it as well. For first and second graders, a little bit of scaffolding, giving them one prompt, because I think more than one is just overwhelming for that grade. We're learning how to write, but they don't necessarily need to trace over the letters like a kindergartner might, but you could also use that system. Then for third, fourth, and fifth grade, that's where I created 3 writing prompts for every day so that they had more choice. They could deal with having a few more choices. And so in fifth grade, when we pull up the prompts during Daily 5, we quickly look at them and then I have the kids kind of make a plan tentatively of what they're going to write about. I do have students that will have a whole story that they're writing on their own and they don't even want the prompts, and that's fine. But the way that I had scaffolded this for them that they were able to have creative time and not look at it as a grading period or anything punitive. It's just a fun time to write. And I will still look in their writing journals, and then I just leave them comments or a sticker with something inspirational about their work. It's not ever graded. The only way that they are graded on this is just being held accountable for getting their work done. And if I check in on it every week with them, then they know that I'm going to look, but they look forward to reading my comments. So I would urge you to do that in the upper grades. You could check their writer's journal during Daily 5 and give them a little bit of feedback, but see the amazing creative writing pieces that they are coming up with. It's a great conversation starter with some of your students that maybe are more shy, but that could be a way to bridge the gap with them. It's something you could show in parent-teacher conferences, how creative they've been. I've even had students that were hyper fixated on a certain topic, and it was a great time for them to research and write a research paper on their own volition, something that they wanted to do. And I encourage that because, again, the point of work on writing and inspiring those reluctant writers is just giving them that freedom, that license to write in a creative way that actually helps them see themselves as a writer instead of being forced to always write specifically what we're tasking them with during that whole group writing lesson. I also like to provide as an option using technology. So especially in 5th grade, they do sometimes have a one-to-one device, and I'm not a big fan of always being on an iPad or a laptop, but if somebody would prefer to type versus writing pencil to paper, then I'm going to not use that as a barrier. I want them to be creative. So absolutely, they're allowed to use their iPad. And that circles back to my previous YouTube videos about listen to reading. And if you're worried about the technology piece, I have Apple Classroom, and so I can view what they're working on. And if they're not work on writing when they're supposed to be, then I know because I have the smartboard chart up on the wall, and I can see, oh, so-and-so is supposed to be work on writing, but they're listening to reading instead, so I can lock them out. So go check that video out if the technology part of work on writing bothers you. You can see what I do for listen to reading, and it applies the same if you allow your kids to use devices for work on writing. Like I mentioned before, you're creating a low stress environment, a low barrier to entry by not grading this and making it punitive. Simply glancing over their journals at a certain day of the week so they know that you're going to check in on them, and just writing them comments and having that open communication in a space where you're writing will really help some of your reluctant writers and maybe some of your kids that have more shy personalities and are dying to have a conversation with you, but they don't feel like they can do that in the class full of kids, but they can inside of their writer's notebook. I hope all of those tips helped you today with allowing creativity in your classroom during work on writing and really reaching those reluctant writers who have a spark of creativity that they just haven't been allowed to express yet. And I know there's always going to be someone that doesn't necessarily love the writing prompts, but I've tested this out for years now, and I've never had a kid say they hated it. They always say they like them. And then if I forget to put them up in between choices during Daily 5, somebody always says, "You forgot to put up the prompts." And then they do that for me. They help me pull them up. So if writing prompts are holding you back, then go down to the description box below. Check them out. I have them for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, all bundled together. And you can try a month at a time if that's better for you, or you can grab the whole entire school year bundled up and ready to go. And I use them in my classroom, and I've tested them, like I mentioned, and you will absolutely love them. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next week.